alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm your host, Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a returning guest, Zachary Hagen. Welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me again. I'm really glad to be back.
Well, it's really good to have you again. I mean, honestly, I feel like we didn't really... I mean, honestly, I'd never remember the show that long because I had to do these all the time. So I get swamped with... different memories. They pile up quickly. So anyway, Remind people a bit about what you write and the sort of books you have out there.
Yeah, so I have new adult fantasy. Eternity's Well came out last August, and it's been well reviewed, well received by those who have been able to get their hands on it. And at the end of this month, March, I'm releasing the sequel to that, Eternity's Mirror. Picks up right where the first one leaves off, so I'm really excited for people to be able to continue the story.
Awesome. So this is fantasy. Is it like urban fantasy, or is it? I'm just to refresh me and our listeners because we have a lot of new ones.
Yeah. So there are some elements of urban fantasy, high fantasy. Think The Lord of the Rings or Chronicles of Narnia if it was set in the 21st century.
Ah, yes. I now remember from last time. Yeah, so that makes sense. I really like that kind of thing, and I think I mentioned this last time too, but I really love the setting, which is kind of non-standard fantasy, where you don't have to do medieval technology or any kind of historical technology. I mean, granted, the Napoleonic fantasy I've read was an interesting idea. I'm not going to say the name because it didn't really it didn't make me that happy as a story, but it was a good idea for a setting. You know what I mean? But yeah, 21st with really advanced technology, that adds a lot to the setting in some ways. You know, do you have like the internet in your story world? Do you have an internet type?
Yeah, there's internet. They don't spend a whole lot of time on it, but it definitely exists, and it aids in things because there are a couple times where the problem is, we have cell phones, but we can't use the GPS because we're wanted and they'll track us, or we've been transported to a place where this technology does not work for us anymore, which is a big part of the second book because they've gone from the world that they know to the other side of it. Because in my universe, the world is sort of like a large flat disc, but both sides are populated.
Ooh,
and they
neat.
have differing levels of advancement.
Yeah, so it's not just a turtle on the other side. Well, elephants and a turtle. Anyway.
Yeah, it's not turtles all the way down.
Yeah. I was actually thinking of the Discworld. There's only the one turtle in that, as far as I'm aware. But hey,
right.
Terry Pratchett, great author. Rest in peace. Anyway, amazing books. Love the Discworld. So anyway, I was thinking. That just is the unusual geography. So getting to the other side, is that tricky in your setting? I'm just curious here.
Yeah. So one thing that I really had a lot of fun with is if people have read the first book, and if you haven't, go check it out because I know that people have really enjoyed it. You can see from the reviews, except for the few that are bad, but every author gets those. So because it's 21st century fantasy, there's an obvious marriage between technology and magic that happens. And so Magitech International kind of handles all of that. And in the sequel, a disgraced magic technician actually joins their team and is integral to actually getting them to the other side. Because she has a way of interacting with ancient artifacts, which is Eternity's Mirror, which opens a portal to the other side of the world.
Ah, so these sides are kind of separate from each other to begin with, though. They don't interact that much, the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
Or whatever, the opposite edges, whatever, the flat edge.
Yeah, so it's Luxterra is the side that everyone will be familiar with from the first book, and then Noxterra is the other side. And realistically, because of the way the world develops and how people get out of touch with reality, I think in a lot of ways, I've mimicked that in my world where the people on Lux Terra's side with all the technology and how fast life moves, they don't even really remember fully that Nox Terra is there. It's become a mythos or a legend to them, where it seems like a fairy tale because it's been so long since they've been connected.
Ah, yes, the ancient unknown that you've heard the stories, but you didn't think it was real. And also,
Right.
I say trope. When I say trope here, I mean it with all the love that you can have for a trope. I love that. That's a fun trope.
It is.
Yeah.
Some tropes become cliches when they're overdone, and it's fantasy. So there are some tropes that I have to use because they are the fantasy tropes. But I like to do it tongue in cheek, where it's always kind of like the characters are self-aware because they've read fantasy books.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, if you've got a publishing industry in your world, they're going to have that kind of fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That actually kind of reminds me. There's this funny thing. There are a couple things. Mostly, I want, on a more serious note. Anyway, I want to say this reminds me a little bit of what is it? My book Origin of Storms has this. It's a sci-fi, but it's set in this very unusual physical universe and a pillar universe. People can look back at old episodes if you want to ever hear me describe that, because it's kind of a deep one, but. In that case, there's kind of an alien first contact story in this book, and then they realize it's not first contact. They just think it was. It's not and it's not quite an ancient aliens thing, because it's just like, we forgot all about this because, various reasons. And then, but the other point I want to make that actually also mirrors that is, if you have fiction in your setting or any kind of, having ideas that aren't real in the context of the fantasy world is really fascinating to me, and I just wondered, how much do you do with that? I mean that sounds more like literature or magical realism when I say it like that. So I'm imagining not a ton, but it is fascinating.
Yeah, well, I mean, because I'm Latino, there's always going to be elements of magical realism in my work. I've actually gotten marked off for elements of that with my fiction writing class this quarter. I had a comment from my professor. This doesn't seem like it would work. I'm personifying an object. Why doesn't it work?
That's your culture, man. Come on. You can't. You can get a professor for discrimination. Like, what do you mean you don't like magical realism? It's unfair.
I know. It's funny. I mean, it didn't destroy my grade in the class. I wasn't too worried about it, and I'm mostly in it for the extra credentials and the development as a writer anyway, so the grade is secondary. But I do like A's.
Yeah, who doesn't? I guess there's some people that don't. Now I can imagine some people who don't. Anyway, so so anyway, speaking of your writing process in general, though, you getting improving as a writer, I was curious, how many, because I don't remember if I asked you this last time, but how many books have you written versus published, or is it the same number?
Yeah, so I think I have about 3 or 4, like half or quarter manuscripts that I couldn't finish. I just could not get to it. And then I started writing Eternities and I stopped for a long time. And then after I lost my job in early 2021, I had nothing else to do. And I had the severance pays that was keeping us afloat. So I was just like, I'm just going to make writing my full-time job while I'm waiting to find another. And so I set a word count goal for every day. And once I met that, I could relax, and that seems to work for me.
Nice. So what's your word count goal, if I may ask? Or it's probably changed over time, I would bet.
It's changed. Right now, instead of setting a specific word count goal, I set it by deadline. So for the third book, which I'm writing now, I'm getting the first draft done in the series. I have about 1,500 words a day that I'll write, and then I'll write another 500 words in the other book that I'm writing. Now I'm writing 2 at a time.
Hey, I mean, as people who've been following this show will know, that's a madness that I share. I have written I've been writing a lot of projects at once, actually. I was like 12 projects at a time or some stupid crap.
Oh, gosh.
Because it was actually, it's because I was trying to do 10 serials for Kindle Vella and keep them up to date each week. And so that with multiple updates each week for each one, so that's most of the work. And then that was too much, so I had to scale. I'm scaling it back in March here. But anyway, enough about that.
I haven't tried Kindle Vella yet. I thought about it, though.
It's an interesting platform, and the bonuses are substantial right now, so you might want, and also they don't take a ton of rights. That's the nice part. They don't. Okay. It requires very few rights to publish. They require very little of you to publish there. So it's handy, and it's handy because they will pay you for almost nothing, for doing almost no work that you weren't going to do anyway, if you're comfortable with publishing your novel as you write it, which I know a lot of people aren't. I wouldn't have been a few years ago.
It's an interesting concept. I think I would try it. I have an idea, kind of a throwaway, that I could try it out with. I had this idea the other day because someone said white raven. Of course, usually ravens are black, but let's see, what did I... It was a gated community with paranormal and fantasy creatures living in it, and then one human family moves in, and shenanigans ensue.
That sounds like fun, actually. Yeah, and that could be good. You could do that kind of like a sitcom too. You could do it, so you could you could do more bite-sized short story type things in there pretty easily if it's a comedy. I think I don't want to say comedy doesn't make for novels, but I think it also makes better bites because you get more, because the jokes mean you're having a good time like that, more frequently.
Yeah,
as a reader,
I might almost approach it like a Modern Family meets Steven Universe meets vampire novel type thing.
That sounds great, actually. I'm not sure if you need to serialize it, but I definitely think that'd be awesome if you wrote it. That sounds like fun.
Yeah. I have a ton of ideas for when I'm done with my current projects.
Oh, who does? Absolutely. And I think once you finish your first novel, it's kind of like, and I'm going to use the anime analogy. I don't know how many people are going to get this. I don't know if you're going to get it, but it's kind of like in the Hunter x Hunter anime, where they discover magic like halfway through the show, and then after that everything's different. And it's kind of, writing a novel is kind of like that. It's like, now I can do this thing, I know how to do it, and like and it was always there. This ability was always there, but now I see it everywhere. Is kind of the gist of it.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely true, because before I wrote my debut, it felt like this mysterious thing that only the intellectual elite could do, finishing a novel. And I was like, I can't do that. And then I did it. And I was like, oh, the reason why no one else's advice worked is because everyone has to find their own process. It works differently for everyone because there are as many ways to write as there are people in the world to write.
Yes. And, also, as much as it would be nice if, it would actually be pretty rotten if it was an elite task, right? You're to be some kind of superhuman to write a book. But it's funny. I'm just imagining 14-year-old me probably did think he was some kind of superhuman because he wrote a novel. But anyway, that first book, even though the first book was demonstrably garbage, but in a lot of ways, it had. But the other thing about that is that those early books, they kind of, at least for me, they left this template for things that I wanted to put in a book, because I'm like, I don't know if I can do this again. And it's the vibe you have when you're first writing, right? At least that's how I felt. Like, I don't know how easy this is going to be. It took a month to write that book, and then honestly, not as many months as I would have guessed when I started writing it. But when I don't know, how is it for you? Did you have that kind of feeling of, I'm not sure if I wanted to do this again when you started? Or because you've got some unfinished work, so I'm betting go on.
I don't think I had that when I was writing Eternity's Well, because it always felt like the beginning of a series to me. And that's why, for that series, I decided to self-publish it, because there was no way that I was going to take a chance on the first book and then have it not be picked up for the other 4 that I had in my head for it. So I was like, I'll start with self-publishing. Just get that foot in the door, build an audience there. So I didn't feel that way with Eternity as well, but I will say that I definitely felt that way with other books that I tried to start writing, which I think was what kind of kicked me out of finishing them, because I didn't feel like I could. And then it's so stupid, but I will say that whoever, I don't remember the names of the people who invented Scrivener, but they are God's gift to writers everywhere.
Literature and Latte is the name of the company.
Literature and Latte. Because one thing that kept me from finishing other novels, and this is so stupid, but this is just ADHD brain, I would get tired of scrolling through the documents when I opened it after, closing it down and saving. Because once it got to about 50, 60 pages, I'm like, this is really long time. And I had an idea for what I wanted to write, and now it's gone because I've spent the last 5 minutes scrolling because because I hadn't figured out how to click to the end because I'm not technologically savvy. I could have just, clicked on the bar and just clicked to the bottom.
There's another trick. If Scrivener ever fails you can just pop open Notepad and just write each chapter in a separate Notepad file. Yeah. That's what I mean, or Word document if you want formatting. Yeah. I kind of like Notepad because formatting is not my friend. I don't like it very much. So I'm actually
really like formatting.
Sure.
I formatted both of my books, which obviously I'm in self-publishing, so I've done pretty much everything myself except for the editing and the cover design because I am an editor as well as a writer. I've read it. I'm working with a client right now to edit her vampire novel, which I won't drop her name or anything like that, but if it turns out the way that I think it's going to be, I will sing her name from the rooftops because I think that it's going to be a fantastic story when it's done. But as much as I enjoy editing, I do not edit my own work. I'll proofread it after leaving it alone for 3 months during the editing process because my editor will take it. She'll do all her things. I'll go to the specific places where she wants something changed or thinks that I could add something in. I'll do that, but I don't read through the entire novel again until the proofreading because that way it's fresh for me.
Interesting. That's an interesting way to go. I used to. I really feel like I mastered. I think it was another level up of like now I see it everywhere kind of thing. It was the last few years after I started dictating novels that I'd written myself because I really love editing. And I know that's a weird, unpopular opinion for a lot of authors, but I
enjoy doing it for other people.
Yeah, exactly. But I've gotten to the point now where I'm like, I do pay a proofreader, but I don't have a ton of money to pay a developmental or a line editor every book. Even though I wish I had the money for the line editor, that one would be cool, or like the copy editor rather. But I don't think the book's. I don't feel like the book's done until I've read it a couple times. Until I read it to myself or read it out loud. I have the computer read it to me. I don't feel like I've done a chapter until I can do that and understand what actually went into it. I feel like I don't know. I'm not saying you're wrong. Obviously, it's just a different process. I just think it's an interesting thing because I feel like I don't even know what I wrote half the time until I read it.
Yeah. See, I don't exactly know what I've written until I've read it, but that's sort of the point because if I go back and I try to read through it, I'm going to be editing and fixing things and doing all that stuff to it, and then I'm never going to move on. So I can't read it until it's really very close to being done, which is why I'll keep my outline close to me so I know what the story is supposed to look like from beginning to end. So I know what the story is. I just, I haven't gone in and enjoyed my choice of word here or loved that verb that I chose or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I went through Eternity's Mirror to proofread it. I guess about a month ago now, I finished the final proofread for it. And there were some things that surprised me.
Oh, nice.
Which is crazy that I can go back to something that I wrote and be surprised by it. But I read through it for my proofread and I change things along the way. If something needed to be phrased better, I'll add commas where they need to go, or take them out if I have them comma happy in a day. Because my editor mostly does big picture things, making sure that scenes work, making sure that everything else kind of falls in line with the shape of the story. Because I do developmental editing, and I found an editor that does it for relatively inexpensive for where I'm at, and she does a really great job. So,
Cool.
Carrie, if you ever end up hearing this, love you and love what you do for the books. But yeah, she's great.
No, yeah, it is interesting. I don't. I guess maybe this is just me being a control freak, but I don't let people have that kind of say over the book when I'm writing it.
Mm-hmm.
I only have basically I don't employ a ton of people to look at it. I don't even really like using beta readers or any of that because for one thing, beta readers have always been unreliable for me. And my books used to be very long; they've gotten shorter. But even now, I'm like, I don't want to spend weeks waiting to hear back from people about every chapter or whatever.
Right.
That seems like a lot, or even just a section of the book. I don't have that kind of time. I don't know about you, but that's books got to come out, you know.
I had beta readers for the first book, and they would read the chapters as I finished them. I had a Google document that I flushed them into when I finished it, and then I changed things according to their recommendations, and I just, I needed to get through the book.
Yeah.
I needed to write it. So I don't touch other readers' perspectives until I have a first draft. And
Makes sense.
my first drafts are relatively clean because I do such heavy plotting. So at least they have been. I'm not sure about this third book because I think it's going to be the biggest one in the series. Because I am... Oh, how many chapters do I have? I'm in chapter 9 and I already have 20,000 words, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
And, I outlined it to be 30 chapters, but one of the chapters I was like, this really needs to be 3 separate chapters. So now it has 33 chapters. And it might grow from there. Mm-hmm.
So you're talking these books are like 50 to 70,000 words, something in that range? Just at least the first two, yeah.
Yeah, the first one was 85,000.
Oh, okay,
so it wasn't
nice and long.
Too much, shorter than what I'm thinking. This one will be at least for the goal I have now. And the second one, first draft, I think I ended up somewhere around 78,000, and it ended at 82,000. So they're about the same length. So they're
Then I don't know, just some
6x9.
Nap Kid math to me makes me think that you don't have anything to worry about if your chapters are need to be about 2,000 words and you only want to have 30 or 40 of them. That's about the same length.
Yeah.
Unless some of your chapters end up being a lot longer.
I think I had one in the last book that was like 5,000 words. I capped it at about 3,500 for this one so far.
Yeah.
I don't like going longer than that because at that point it's like, okay, there has to be an ending or a good stopping point for one chapter somewhere in there because I don't want a reader to be sitting there reading one chapter for 2 hours.
Yes. I personally shoot my chapters to be a little less than 10 pages. So around or even around less than maybe like 7 or 8 pages, like 2,000 words is like my normal chapter length, or a little less than that nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up reading trade books, so I think as long as I'm less than 15 pages from the majority of them, when it's formatted and everything, I feel good about it.
Yeah.
But if I have a chapter that's 20, 25 pages, I'm finding a place to stop it and split it.
No, that
which
makes
is
sense
usually
to
a
me.
scene break.
Yeah.
Because none of my chapters are ever one long scene, and if they are, then they're a shorter chapter.
Right. If it can be contained, if the chapter and the scene are the same thing, then they might as well be. Usually you don't have as much to say for that section. Yeah. Though, I'm actually kind of curious. Even though this is kind of a prosaic question in a lot of ways, what makes a chapter? Because obviously, for you in particular, or is it more just you know what you got when you see it?
I think that for me, chapters are kind of self-contained, where there's an arc to it, because you have a beginning, middle, and an end to a chapter as well. So I'm looking for the same shape for the plot contained in each chapter as I would for the novel itself. So
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Problem to be solved and a resolution, or sometimes it's all building action, but there's always something going wrong and being fixed, going wrong and being fixed. And that's what keeps readers engaged. And then the new problem is introduced, because a good majority of my chapters will end on a cliffhanger.
That makes sense. I think I don't do a ton of cliffhangers. I always say tell myself I don't. But since I've been doing serialized fiction, I feel like that's actually one of my problems is I don't cliffhanger enough.
You definitely need it when you're doing serial fiction, I think, because, I haven't done Vela, but it would make sense that it's the same thing as a TV show. You want it to end in a way that makes people want to watch the next episode.
Yeah. Though in my case, most of my Kindle Velas, I have like a cliffhanger every few chapters because the chapters are actually extremely short. They're like less than a normal novel chapter. In most cases, they're maybe a third of that length of what I would do in a novel. Okay. But anyway, yeah. So I try to do a cliffhanger every so often because you don't pay based on the number of chapters. You pay based on how long the chapters are on Vela as a reader.
Right.
So it's not. I don't think it's any skin off my reader's back if I publish smaller chapters more frequently, and that's what I usually have been doing.
It might actually be better for you to do that because then they're more likely to feel less pain.
Absolutely, and if you read it on a phone too, which is where most people I think are going to read their Kindle Velas stories that they're reading, I would say I don't want to scroll forever on my phone. I don't want to read a 3,000 word chapter by scrolling on my phone. I like the Kindle app just fine, but that's easy because you just get pages that are individual and you thumb to the side and you just swipe. And I do most of my reading on the phone now, which is I didn't think I was that. I would have said that even a couple years ago. Yeah.
I read on my iPad when I do ebooks. I thought about getting just a Kindle, because I feel like I would be less distracted if that was the purpose of the device. Mm-hmm. But, I have an iPad, so what is the point of spending another
$100? Kindles are pretty expensive these days, yeah.
Yeah, which isn't a bad thing.
No.
Do I need to do that right now? And right now, probably not. If I get it to the point where I'm reading, 30, 40 books a month, I might.
Yeah, then you're going to be able to save some money by getting Kindle Unlimited as well, probably.
Yeah, Kindle Unlimited I actually have because I felt like I needed to, because I read enough that it makes sense for me, but I don't read enough that it also makes sense to have a device that's dedicated specifically to that.
Oh no, that follows. I don't have like an e-ink Kindle. I just have the Fire and the phone. But anyway, and I prefer the phone for reading for some reason. I guess because the pages are smaller, so I don't feel like I'm getting distracted as much.
Right. I don't know. I've always loved my chunky books. Something nice and sturdy to hold. Although this isn't a particularly entertaining book, but
yeah. Okay. Yeah, but it's a big one. It looks like a textbook. Anyway, yeah. But Zachary, remind people where they can find your stuff because we are about out of time. Time flies.
Yeah. So Eternity's Well and Eternity's Mirror are both available on Barnes and Noble and on Amazon, and soon you can order them wherever books are sold. Ebook will be exclusive to Amazon, though.
And you got that? Is that up on pre-order now for the second one?
Yep, the second one is available for pre-order.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Zach. It's been fun. Zachary Hagen, folks.
That's all right.
I try to stick to the author name. That way people don't get confused.
Yeah, and if people want my free reader magnet, they can join my newsletter at ZacharyHagenWrites.com.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks for listening, everybody. You can find more about this podcast at mentalsettlerpublications.com. I think I forgot to say that in the future, which is a weird thing to say. But anyway, never mind. Do not peer behind the curtain. And you can find my books at mentalsellerpublications.com or timniederreiter.com/books. And they're all the books are currently exclusive with Amazon, but who knows? Something might be in the works for the ebooks going somewhere else. So pay attention, stay tuned, and thanks for listening. I'll talk to you again next week, people. Have a good one and stay safe out there. Bye-bye.